We are so excited to be with you all tonight. I'm going to pull back up the slides really quickly, which I think you can see. Can you see them?
They're coming.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. So we are going to be talking about what the Massachusetts FY2025 budget means to you and how to prepare for FY2026 tonight. So we're going to start off with welcome and introductions. We'll talk a little bit about the FY2025, the fiscal year 2025 budget, and then we'll go into the 2026 budget. Before we start all of that, we wanted to get a better sense of who all is in the room tonight. So if you could go ahead and put in the chat the number that corresponds to you. So number 1, if you either are the caregiver of a young child or you work with children and families every day. Number 2, if you work with children and families occasionally. And number 3, if you do not regularly work with children and families, but you do have a vested interest. So go ahead and why don't you put those numbers in the chat. If you want to share a little bit about where you're zooming in from across the state, go ahead and add that too. And we'll see, I'm seeing lots of numbers pop in, lots of 1s, lots of 2s, and lots of 3s. It's a good mix. All right. And before we get into the topics, I want to take a minute just to let our amazing team introduce themselves. So I'm Marissa Fear. I'm the Director of Policy at Strategies for Children. Amy and Neri, do you want to say hi quick?
Sure, thanks, Marissa. I'm Amy O'Leary. I'm the Executive Director at Strategies for Children. Neri, you're muted.
Doing too much at once. Hi, my name is Diagnetis Garcia, and I'm the Director of Communications for Strategies for Children.
And Dan and Juan, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, I'm Dan Hoffer. I'm the Legislative and Political Director at SEIU Local 509. Juan, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Juan Pablo Jaramillo, Deputy Legislative Director at SEIU Local 509.
And Latoya and Liz.
And hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Latoya Gale. I'm Senior Director of Advocacy at Neighborhood Villages. And Liz?
And I'm Liz Lewan. I'm the Chief of Policy and Advocacy at Neighborhood Villages.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
So as you can see from the intros,
Marissa, I'm sorry to interrupt. We also have Jaylise LeBlanc is here from our team.
Oh, great. Jaylise, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Jaylise LeBlanc, and I'm the Program Assistant at Strategies for Children.
Thanks, Jaylise. So as you can see, there are 3 different organizations that all kind of came together to put this presentation together and wanted to co-host this meeting for everyone to talk about the past year's annual state budget and then think about advocacy for the future. So just wanted to acknowledge that the 3 of us, or the 3 organizations, kind of all came together for this project, and we're excited to chat with you all today and learn more about how you're feeling after the FY2025 state budget, and then what you're sort of looking forward to for next year. So before we jump into all of that, we wanted to start with a Zoom poll to get a better sense of what people are thinking about, what's sort of coming up for you as you think about last year's state budget, and better understand who all is in the room tonight. So in 1 second, I'm going to launch that poll. And then for translation and interpretation, what would be easiest? Would it be easier just to sort of post the questions in the chat or read through some of the responses? You can go ahead and launch it too.
Yeah, maybe if we launch it and then our interpreters can see what the questions are.
Okay.
And put them in the channels.
There we go. So here I just launched the poll. The very first question is just tell us about yourself. So are you an FCC educator? Do you work in a center-based program? Are you the director at a center? Are you a parent, an advocate? Do you feel like you have a good understanding of the Massachusetts state budget process is the second question. So yes, you feel like you understood what happened. No, somewhat, not sure. Do you know what was included in the final FY2025 state budget? So again, yes, no, somewhat, not sure. The fourth question is, are you happy with the funding levels and policy language that was included in the budget? So yes, no, somewhat, not sure. And then the final, or the next two questions are really for programs. So if you are either a family childcare or you work in a center-based group and school age program, we would love to know, how did your C3 monthly grant amount change in November? And so go ahead and answer that question if you are a program. And then for number 6, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the frozen waitlist for childcare financial assistance. And so we want to know how the frozen waitlist is affecting you. So has it decreased your enrollment? Do you have families that are currently enrolled that are on that wait list right now, waiting for access to a childcare subsidy? Are you worried about how it might affect your C3 grant in the future? Are you worried about how it impacts your ability to access other resources or funding that may be tied to CCFA enrollment? And or do you not enroll children with childcare financial assistance? And then the final question is long answer. So we wanted to just leave a little space there. It's anonymous. If you want to put in a question or a comment, something that you're thinking about that you hope we discuss tonight, go ahead and add that to that final space in the poll. And we will give it, let's give it another 2 minutes maybe. We'll go to 5:45, 5:46. Or 6:46, and then go from there. So I'm seeing some answers start to pop up. We have about 30% of the participants have answered questions, so we'll wait until we get above 50 maybe. All right. I'll be quiet for the next minute or so and let people think as they answer some of those questions.
And Marissa, while folks are filling out the poll, just reminding the speakers to keep it slow and steady for our team from Excel that is providing interpretation. And I also added to the chat, FY means fiscal year. And the fiscal year we're talking about was July 1st, 2024 until June 25th, 2025.
All right, we are almost at 50%. So let's give it another few seconds and then I'll close the poll. All righty, so I just closed the poll and I'm going to share the results now. So you should be able to see the results. Okay, so it seems like we have 43%, and you could select more than one. So there's a high chance that you are both a family child care owner, an educator, and an advocate, or a parent and an advocate. So just wanted to acknowledge that. But we have about 39% said that they were family child care. 4% are classroom educators, 18% center directors, 21% parents, and 43% advocates. Do you feel like you have a good understanding of the budget process? 39% said yes, 18% said no, 39% said somewhat, and 4% said not sure. Seems like there's actually a pretty good percentage of people that feel like they understand the budget process, which is great because we might not go into those slides as much tonight. Then we'll just share them in the follow-up. Do you know what was included in the state budget? So again, a good percentage feel like they either yes or somewhat, they know what was included in the state budget, but there is still a number of people that aren't quite sure or that don't know. More people are sort of somewhat happy with the funding levels and the policy language that was included in the budget than fully happy or fully not happy. Okay, so when we look at C3, we had about 16 different people answer. So we had 6 people say that their grant amount increased, 6 people say that their grant amount decreased, and 4 people say that their grant amount stayed the same. And then finally, when we think about the frozen wait list for childcare financial assistance subsidies, about 7 people that it has decreased their enrollment. 5 people have families that are currently enrolled in their programs and are on the CCFA, the Child Care Financial Assistance waitlist. 7 people are worried about how that freeze might affect their C3 grant in the future. 4 do not enroll children with child care financial assistance, and 8 are worried about how it might affect their ability to access other resources or funding. And then we'll go ahead and we'll review those long response questions later. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Thank you all for taking some time to answer that tonight. So what I would love to do next is talk a little bit about what we have in the slides tonight, and then we're going to kind of turn it over to you, and I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Or if you want to use the raise hand function, you can go ahead and come off mute. What we have prepared is we can talk a little bit about what was included in the state budget and, you know, how that might feel different from what you're experiencing in real life right now. And then the second part of our presentation is really about preparing for next year. So as Amy mentioned, the fiscal year ends June 30th of 2025, and then the next fiscal year will begin in July. So right now is when sort of the planning and the advocacy needs to take place as we think about next fiscal year's budget. So I'd love to hear from you all in the chat, or go ahead and use the raise hand function. What would you like to talk about tonight? Are there any topics that are coming up from you that are important that you want to learn more about? Do you have questions? What is something that we can discuss all together?
And maybe, Marissa, we can take the slides down so we can see folks.
Here we go.
Something that I noticed came up in the poll, if people jump in here too, is I'm worried that the wait list freeze will impact my ability to access resources or funding tied to CCFA enrollment. I don't know if people want to start there. Yeah.
How long do we anticipate the freeze to continue for parents to receive vouchers for their children? It seems as if in the past, as a provider, I'm always trying to support my parents for vouchers. And when I've contacted the agency, they're telling me that they're still within a 2023 year budget.
Hi, Donna.
I mean, that's a long, hi, how are you? That's like
Good.
a pretty long time to be in 2024, and now we're going to 2025, and the freeze budget is 2023. And then with that being said, is that those parents who are on the wait list, who were initially, you know, if you call in the 211 line, they would also say, you know, what number you are as a parent to get the voucher, you know, how, and you figure, okay, I'm getting closer. And then they say, yeah, well, that is considered to be like April, which was earlier this year. And then when April comes, you're being told there's a freeze. So now they're not getting the voucher because there's a freeze when they waited and said, okay, I only got 2 more months for April to approach. And now there's a freeze, and now I'm not getting anything because the budget is not in 2024, it's in 2023. So it just seems misleading to parents who think they're going to be getting something at a certain time, but not knowing that there is a freeze, and then the provider is saying, well, there is a freeze, but hopefully this will be removed in time, for you to have some. So there are parents that are struggling, waiting on these vouchers. So my question is like, when the freeze is released, how are they gonna deal with that when they're in the budget of 2023? We're going into 2025, and you still have 2024 that you're not even in yet. So how is that situation going to be dealt with?
That is a great question. And also just want to thank you for being the first person to jump off of mute and ask it. So thank you for doing that. And then Latoya, what do you think? Should we jump into a couple of those slides that are related to that, or you just want to talk about it?
Yeah. We can.
Maybe take a few more questions and then,
Yeah. Let's.
and Anna Teresa put something in the chat. I'm curious to see if the waitlist will open soon with the family childcare systems recently
Yep.
renewing contracts. A lot have openings. So there's a couple of things going on, right? There's a waitlist freeze. There's a reissuing of contracted slots. So any other please put questions in the chat. You can also just private message me if you want to put the question in chat, but maybe not put it out for everyone, and I'll ask it. So that's another option too.
Okay, and then how come there is a freeze on vouchers, but the centers opening support, hold on, my screen, hold on. Opening support by EEC with vouchers. Oh, okay.
I think, Paula, are you talking about contracted slots? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yes.
Hi, Harold.
Hi.
Okay, yeah, maybe let's start with that then. That's a pretty big topic, and that's important for a lot of people.
We feel that it's a kind of a contradiction that it's freezing but for family child cares but not for centers. So somebody needs to explain
well, just to clarify, it is frozen for centers too, the vouchers, but contracts are different.
Yeah.
So take away Marissa and Latoya.
Yeah, exactly. So
can I ask this question? So the funding that the agency are receiving that are contracted through EEC, how is it different than the voucher? Because they're receiving funding.
Yeah,
they're getting funding from somewhere.
You just got to the point
where
of
the
it.
funding coming from in order for the system to receive it for those parents, and the providers are not getting the vouchers released because I run the network group in Randolph.
Okay.
And we have some providers who have been struggling, who opened earlier this year. They're hanging on by a thread, hoping that the vouchers freeze would be released. And now they're thinking about closing. And I know one of the biggest issues is that we don't have enough providers. So how do we keep the providers if we have a freeze on vouchers? I mean, how are we going to turn this around?
Yeah, these are great. These are really great questions.
One more thing, Marissa, it's that let's not forget that a voucher for a family child care is less expensive for the state than a voucher for a center.
So reimbursement rate too is another topic we can jump on. Okay, so before we jump into all of this, I think the first thing I want to say just to frame this conversation is, as much as I want to say like, yes, vouchers are going to be open tomorrow, the freeze is over, and give you all good news in that way, that is not the reality of the situation that we're in right now. So what I would love for us all to kind of think about this conversation as is, we wanted to have this conversation tonight because your advocacy is going to be so important in the next few months. And you all establishing relationships with your legislators, being able to tell the stories of what you're experiencing, making sure that they understand what the families in your programs are going through, what your communities are going through, and what you're experiencing is so, so important as you think about the next year's state budget. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we have this conversation. So Amy just put in the chat, the legislature allocates money to the Department of Early Education and Care. So every year in Massachusetts, there is a state budget process that funds state government and the child care financial assistance system, so vouchers and contracts, are funded through that process. So I'm going to put contracts aside for a second because that's a slightly different process. But what happened with the vouchers is there was not sufficient funding in the FY2025 state budget to give vouchers to new families. That's sort of just, there was a little bit of complications there, but there wasn't enough funding to give vouchers to new families. So because EEC receives their funding from the legislature, they were sort of forced to put a freeze on it because, like all of us, if they don't have money in their accounts, they can't overspend. So they're kind of forced to live within their means and live within what they're allocated. So that's sort of the history behind where we are and why there is a freeze on vouchers. Amy mentioned that this affects both centers and family childcare programs. So a voucher follows a family wherever they want to go. So if they go to a family childcare program or to a center. The difference with contracted slots is that the contracted slots essentially, the state of Massachusetts contracts with a center like and sometimes family childcare systems a certain number of slots. So say it's like we're gonna, as is the state of Massachusetts, we're gonna buy 10 slots from this family childcare system or from this center-based program to make sure that there are openings for children with financial assistance and that that program has the resources they need to serve the population that they are. So there's some certain grant requirements that go along with it. It's a different process than the vouchers. So that's kind of the difference that you might see in some of the conversations at EEC about contracted slots versus vouchers. LaToya, is there anything you want to add to the kind of like explainer there of what happened
No.
with the budget? Okay. So the headline there is last fiscal year, there wasn't enough money to give vouchers to new families, which means that as we think about FY2026, advocating for more money for vouchers for the child care financial assistance system is going to be really important if we want to open that back up and make sure that families can come off of the wait list and that programs can continue to enroll families with CCFA.
All right. And I want us to keep in the back of our mind as we're having this conversation, like collectively, this group and everyone that you touch and talk to, like thinking about what the budget priorities that we have for FY2026 for the governor's budget. And so, I mean, I would say up there is increasing funding for vouchers, right? We have too many people on wait lists for vouchers. And the only way to move that list is more money in that line item. So like if we're thinking about our priorities, more money for vouchers.
Great. And so when you all think about like what are some of the things that you could maybe tell in a story to the legislature, you could talk about, you know, the families that are enrolled in your program that are on the wait list right now. You can talk about, you know, the families that are struggling financially that you're connected with, that you know need support, they need financial assistance. Wendy, I see your comment in the chat. You can talk about how C3 and other resources that are available to EEC programs are tied in lots of ways to enrollment of vouchers. And so if that system is frozen, that limits the resources that are available to programs, and we don't want that to be the case. So start to think about some of these things and how they relate to you and what you would maybe include in a story if you were talking to the legislature about what you're experiencing.
I also got a direct message that said, another thought, the see-through grant has been helpful, but many say they'd rather have more vouchers, so more children on vouchers than receiving this monthly grant. And I would just caution us because they're two different funding streams. I get the sentiment, but we don't want to create those kinds of choices for the legislature. But I totally appreciate what you're saying. And I think that's why meetings like this, to understand like just what Donna said, like where is this money coming from, make it make sense.
Right. And I would even say, I know we have a slide in here too about what happened and like why don't I feel it?
I'll pull it up while you're
The
talking.
reality of what happened. And thinking about the channels for advocacy, we are talking about the budget. And so more money for vouchers is a thing. And also when we're talking about like regulations and how EEC sets the formula for C3, I say be bold in your ask. If there's not enough money for vouchers currently, asking maybe, can families who are on a wait list also be considered when you're looking at my C3 money? Because those are families that those are families that would qualify, who do qualify, but there's no money for them. So as a provider, can, should that be taken into consideration when you're doling out C3 grants?
Well, I'm gonna start here before I go
Yes.
on in the next slide a little more, because I love
Yeah,
Latoya's piece here. So Latoya, do you want to say a little bit about this idea?
Yeah. And I said a little bit, like, be bold in your ask. Every policy that we have starts as an idea. You are a provider, you are a parent, you have a need, and you tell your story, you express that need, and then with legislators, you say what policy solution, can policy be a solution to this issue, to this problem I'm having? And so, like, as you guys are talking and thinking, you know what the issue is. You don't want to raise prices for families. You need money to operate your businesses. What is the policy solution? And even thinking, in hard times like we might be in this upcoming year, what are the constraints that we are operating in as we're thinking about it? So be bold in your ideas and your ask, the way you guys are on this call, just being open. When you're having conversations with your legislators, with folks at EEC who you're building a relationship with, be honest and tell them, like, where your pain points are, so they can come up with solutions that will impact you. So this reality bucket on this slide might look different for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we did the poll, it seemed like a good number of people had an understanding of what passed through the state budget. So I'm not going to go into all of the details, but we do have a lot of resources that we can share with you. So
Yeah.
our team can put this into the chat, but the Strategies for Children budget page goes through every single early education and care line item in the state budget. So it includes the language that sets certain guide rails or requirements for that funding, and then also talks about the funding amounts. And the Neighborhood Villages also did a really great explainer about what some of the policy changes that were included in the state budget. So we can share all of those in the chat so that you have those resources and you can learn a little bit more about both. But for our limited time tonight, I'm just going to go through some quick highlights and connect them, sort of make those connections between this idea, the policy reform, and then what happens in reality right now. And what I would encourage you all to do while I am going through that is to think about this slide. So, picture, like, there's policy reform right here, and then here's your reality, and there's this gap between the two of them. So what are the things that we need to change so that we make sure that your ideas, your solutions become the reality, that you're actually feeling better, that this is improving your lives and the children and families that you work on behalf of? And two of those things that we know are in that gap is implementation advocacy. So making sure that the policy changes become real programs that work the way that they were designed and that are effective, and increased investment. So making sure that there's enough funding that goes towards something so that children and families can use it and that you all have the resources that you need. So keep that in mind as we're looking at these slides. So in the fiscal year 2025 state budget, language passed that increased the income eligibility for childcare financial assistance to 85% of the state median income, sort of in the immediate future, and then potentially beyond that as well. So, I mean, this is incredible. It will make it so that there are, a significantly higher number of families that are eligible for financial assistance in Massachusetts. What does that mean in your reality today? We just talked a lot about the wait list. So access is frozen right now because there was limited funding. We know that this is frustrating for families and that it impacts program enrollment. And we also know that our current system doesn't even have the capacity to serve all of the eligible families up to 85% of state median income. So there's a couple kind of problems there. We need increased funding to make sure that families can actually access financial assistance, that programs can enroll them and get reimbursed. And we know that we need to grow our system because we aren't big enough to serve all the families that might need childcare financial assistance. Free community college was also passed through the state budget. And then Latoya, do you guys want to talk a little bit, you and Liz want to talk a little bit about sort of what's happening in reality and career pathways and all of that?
Yeah. You know, there is free community college, right? But you know, folks still need support. Like how do I access this? And I will also say that some folks don't want a career path, don't want a community college pathway. Some folks are looking for apprenticeships and different pathways to be an early educator. And so when we think about that, like that career pathway support, it can help, you know, educators who want to enter the field, or who want to get new credentials or higher credentials, know like what's available to me, where can I get it, is it free, you know, help them actually access it. But we still need that career pathway support, but the reality is that we kind of don't have it, or they're phasing that out a little bit. Liz, jump in and tell me if I said something wrong.
I'll add to what you said. And
Yes,
say
yes.
that the free community college, the Mastery Connect, and the other ways to access free community college are all great programs, and they're designed in a certain way that is very difficult for a lot of early educators to access, as I think many people on the call are probably experiencing firsthand this year. And so Career Pathways has some unique aspects to the program, including that the classes are paid for through a cohort model in some cases and for the individual educator in some cases, but without having to go through a lot of upfront administrative burden and prove that you don't get access to funding in other ways before you can get access to the free community college scholarship. And so it's both the navigation support that Latoya was just speaking to, and also the buying power of being able to say, we've got 10 people who want to take this course here, community college, we can pay for that course and have these people enrolled. That is much more efficient for teachers and educators, and also for the community college. So there's that piece of it as well. And that's where I think a lot of the stress happened for folks this fall, was the free community college piece was there, the navigation support was there, but suddenly these courses weren't free. And so for all the educators who didn't qualify for free community college, or who didn't have the capacity to fill out the FAFSA, or didn't have a community college near them who had the extra funds, we know a lot of people experienced that, not being able to get access to these courses and needing to have to pay for them out of pocket, or providers paying for them out of pocket for teachers, which we know is very expensive.
I see.
And I noticed,
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I see a question in the chat in Spanish, maybe?
It's not only for people who have citizenship, but you do have to have status. And we know that for the free community college, and that has been a challenge for some folks. As far as I know, for career pathways, that is not a prerequisite. Sorry, said that word in a strange way. I'll also just add, in responding to the question that was asked in Spanish, one of the other pain points has been that the structure of free community college is that you have, and for the EEC scholarship, is that you have to be enrolled in a certain number of classes. And they also only classes that are on, that could lead to a degree count. And so we know a lot of educators come in and need to take classes for English or for other skills to then feel prepared to take some of the degree classes. And so that's another thing that the career pathways money is able to cover that the free community college money doesn't.
And I don't know, we probably have something on the next slide, maybe. I don't know. I was looking at Dan's comments. I don't know if Dan wants to say something about Dan, Dan, maybe I can get you to buy into this my line I've been spouting.
All right.
We want it, let's fund it. SEIU, take it to the top.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think especially for the folks that we represent, the FCC providers, it's been really tricky because in our contract we won, expansion of slots. And it's like we won this expansion at the same time when this freeze is in place and we increased eligibility. So it's like we have to finish this job. And also with the back to school, we have folks that have open seats and need kids. And so, I wish relief was, I think if you were to put, 2 extra kids in every FCC program, that's $100 million. It's about 6,000 kids. So like you have to be bold to have any effect on the system. We have to be thinking big at a time when we know other parts of the economy are going to be attracting, or of the state budget are going to be contracting. We need to make sure that that's not us, and that we are given enough latitude to grow. And that's something that we're going to be really focused on in the new year. But yeah, these are big problems that are going to require bold solutions. So
Yeah,
they're with you, LaToya.
Yep.
And I think that, something that we heard a lot from family childcare last year was how important removing the cap of 10 children on family childcare programs was, which happened. So there is no longer language in state law that says that large family childcare can have no more than 10 children. That has been deleted. That does not mean that all of a sudden now programs can enroll up to 12 children. So what will need to happen is EEC will need to make changes to the license capacity through a regulatory process. So we're expecting that should happen in the near future, which is great news. So to Dan's point, that is 2 more children in family childcare across the country, just expanding the license capacity, which is great. So that's a really important point too. And then the last 2 pieces that we have here are really tied to the operation grants. So the C3 grant program, and then reimbursement rate, which I know came up earlier when we were talking with Harold and Paula. So really exciting. I think we all have had C3 in Massachusetts for a couple of years now, but just to take everyone back mentally to 2021 when that grant program started, it is exceptional that Massachusetts is the only state in the country that still fully funds their operations grant program, and that all of the what is it, 92% of programs in Massachusetts are currently enrolled in that C3 grant program. That is such a win. And we've learned so much about how important having that stable, flexible funding stream that can go to programs is. So what's great is that there is now language in state law that made a permanent operational grant program in Massachusetts. So what does that mean in reality? I think we saw in the poll earlier tonight, some programs grant amounts went up, some programs grant amounts went down, and some stayed the same. So why did that happen? Couple reasons. So the first thing is that the C3 grants were level funded in the FY2025 state budget. So that line item has been at 475 for a couple of years now. The budget also required, so when we talked about the language that might be next to the line item, the budget required the Department of Early Education and Care to update some of the eligibility and the funding formula for the program. So this resulted in EEC having to make those changes, new monthly funding amounts, and some other sort of changes to the program that made it a little bit more sustainable. I think the really important thing here is we're still learning about this program. It will continue to shift over the years as we improve on it and as we get better at delivering this resource to providers. It's also an incredible opportunity to think about educator compensation through that. So for family childcare, for center-based educators, we know that staff that work in early education and care programs, that all of your salaries and your benefits need to go up. And we know that this operation grant presents a really unique opportunity to do that, to make sure that there is funding that comes from the state and flows through to programs, and allows for some of those increases. So that's something that we're tracking in the future. Reimbursement rates is another one. So the policy language requires that reimbursement rates will be set and other funding levels will be set based on the true cost of care. So taking into account things that haven't typically been a part of that calculation in the past. So EEC is wrapping up their first phase of a 2-phase project to update their cost of care model. And we know that there have been significant increases to reimbursement rates over the years. But as Harold pointed out, there are still discrepancies across the state between family child care and center-based. And, across all of those, rates are still not at the true cost of care. So continuing to raise those to a level that is sustainable for programs is really important.
And I want to throw something
Yeah.
else in there too that I know I hear from Harold all the time and lots of FCC providers when thinking about like reimbursement rates, thinking about there's a discrepancy between how much a FCC provider is reimbursed versus a center-based provider. So really thinking about, for a provider, really what would make sense and what feels equitable and fair to the people who are providing the care as you're thinking about what your advocacy asks are and look like.
Yeah. And Wendy, I see you put it in the chat that can access the increased to 12 for family child care. I do not work for the Department of Early Education and Care, so I do not know exactly when it's coming out. But I have heard them talk about it at the EEC board meetings, and so I know that it is in the works, is the best that I can give you.
Right.
But that's a great piece that we can maybe reach out to. I know that the commissioner is coming on the 9:30 call on Thursday this week. And we have a EEC board meeting tomorrow. So trying to get some more clarity on the timeline for that. Happy to do that.
Marissa, could I add? Sorry, Latoya, you go ahead.
No, I was if you want to say, I was going to say something about checking, how you can connect with like implementation advocacy and EEC. I don't know, but you might want to say something different.
Go for it. Let's say
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a slide on here too that we can share like opportunities to engage that we know are coming up around implementation. We have that, and for our neighborhood villages, we also have our policy pulse that comes out every month. We'll resume in January, where we give a recap of the EEC meeting. But also, I was thinking of the other slide. I don't know, it's further up. I don't know. We have a really robust slide deck in here.
This one?
It's like a circle.
This one.
There you go.
There you go.
We'll get it to you. There you go. This is just opportunities that EEC has said, like what they're doing, but like here are the opportunities to give input this year, and a lot of the things people have been talking about are on there. So just want people to know that those things are happening. But Liz, go ahead. You were gonna say something.
I just had something to add about C3. I think this is a much more important use of our last 10 minutes together, but if anyone ever wants to talk C3, I'm happy to do that offline with them.
Cool.
Right. And we have we're going to be sharing out a folder with all like everything that our slide deck and all these resources. And I didn't have it in there, but I will add it to it. Neighborhood Villages C3 fact sheets are not in there, but I can throw those in there. And then of course, Commissioner Kershaw on the 9:30 call this week before the holidays and everybody's taking a break. It's a great time. Oh, you're gonna have translation. Perfect. It's a perfect time for you to talk directly to like the people involved, who are in charge of actually making regulatory decisions for our state.
Yeah, and I see a question in the chat about like where are we on the circle and which direction are we going? I'm not sure that they meant it in like a timeline way. I think this is just I'm gonna go back a slide actually. We'll talk about both of these, but
sorry.
no, you're perfect. The the headline here is that these are the things that EEC was planning on working on this year. It doesn't have to match perfectly with your list. You can pick and choose a few things that you might be interested in, that you want to provide input on, that you want to engage with the department on. You might have different things that they're not thinking about that you want to bring their attention to. Both of those are really important when we think about implementation advocacy. So what I would encourage everyone to do is when you see these slides in the follow-up, look through it and see if there are certain pieces that you're really interested in that really impact you, that are important to your programs or to your work. And we'd love to help support that. So think about how can we help support some advocacy opportunities, where, whether it's a focus group or it's meetings and discussions on the 9:30 call or whatever it is, that can help sort of make some connection points between you all and the Department of Early Education and Care, on top of the connection points that we know that they are already planning. So
I want to say whoever's on the call, who is a Portuguese or Spanish speaker, when you get the follow-up with the decks, we do have the decks translated as well. If you're not clicking through them now with us, we do have the decks translated.
yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
So take a look at these things over the next few days and let us know if there's something on here that's you really want to engage on, or you really want to provide EEC some feedback. So when we were talking about C3, that's on this list. When we were talking about reimbursement rates, that's on this list. I know I've heard it from a lot of programs about how important the renewed sort of licensing regulations is going to be. So that's on this list. There's a lot. And it's all very important. So we want to make sure that, we're moving on to this next year, and that we're all kind of helping to make sure that this is as effective as possible. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. I think I might skip over this slide, but the headline here is that as we think about the next budget cycle, there are a couple things that are really important and that are part of the context going into the next fiscal year. So one, there's a US presidential transition that's happening in January. A lot of funding for early childhood broadly and for childcare in Massachusetts comes from the federal government. There are some things that are fully funded by state dollars, and luckily C3 is one of those things. It's fully funded using state dollars. So that's just really important context to think about. There's a lot of uncertainty about what funding levels will look like, what the new administration's priorities will be. So those are question marks for us right now. What we know will be really important is making strong relationships with your elected officials. We're happy to help support some of those conversations. The 9:30 call is going to be hosting first-year meet and greets with newly elected officials in February. We'd love to connect people who live in those districts with their elected officials, and we're happy to do that. And then the final piece is just the revenue picture in Massachusetts, which for the second year in a row isn't great. So that's going to really impact the funding levels for programs, and as we think about the next budget cycle.
All right. What I want to say is too, it was important for us to have this call like now, because do we have the timeline, the budget timeline? Maybe we can put that slide up. There you go. That the governor will be releasing her budget in January. So it's important that she hears from advocates now. So hopefully we can see in her budget a reflection, at least some reflection of the things that are important to advocates. So the important thing is send her an email now. And in the folder that you're going to get, neighborhood villages, we have like a written test, like a written template for you to use when you're writing your legislator. But send the governor a note and tell her those things that are mattering to you, like you told us on this call. Like if C3 is important to you and you want to see that continue, and it needs more money, ask for more money. We know it's funded at 475 now. And I'm not gonna throw out a number because I know we're different organizations on here, and we might be thinking differently about like how much more we need. But the point is that we need more for this program to continue, and for people's grants not to fall. So when you think about what you're prioritizing in the budget, everyone on this call, I think, was in agreement that we need more money for CCFA. So make sure you let the governor know more money for CCFA, more money for C3, the things that, and whatever else that, wasn't said on this call that's important to you. It's important that she hears your story, hears why it matters to you, and ask her to please include it in her budget.
And this isn't the last time we're gonna be hosting
No.
meetings like this. We're gonna keep doing things like this throughout the entire budget process. We'll keep creating templates and opportunities for you all to engage in this as well. So, but Latoya's right, it starts now and the governor's budget comes out in January. So it's a great time to reach out.
And then we'll bug the House.
Yeah, and then the House is next.
Yes, the House is next.
Let's
So
reframe that. We're not bugging anybody. We
No,
are
you're right.
advocating.
We are, this is right.
So
Right.
Latoya
I like
mentioned-
that. Slots.
So Latoya mentioned that there's a template that you can use for the governor's budget. We'll share that in the follow-up. Stay connected. You can sign up for neighborhood villages, for the Pulse and for their mailing list. You can sign up for SEIU Local 509. I saw some connections that were made in the chat there.
Yeah.
You can sign up for the 9:30 call. As we mentioned, the commissioner's coming on Thursday if you want to hear an update on the budget, but don't want to watch the full 3-hour the full 3-hour board meeting, not budget. And then take advantage of those implementation advocacy opportunities that EEC is working on a lot. They're working on making a lot of the policy reform that happened in the budget a reality. And we want to make sure that you all are connected in that process. So let us know what you're interested in and how we can help. And we're going to start thinking about that too.
Yeah.
So I know we have 1 minute left, right on time. Why don't you go ahead and let us know in the chat there's something that you still have a question about or that you want to learn more about, something that you might have learned today.
And if you have a question that you want me to ask the commissioner on Thursday,
yeah.
And then I also added, we have the 9:30 call at night in Espanol tomorrow at 6:30 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to put my email in the chat too, and I will ask it anonymously, or I can, whatever you want to ask, but that way, and people do that live on the call too. They just send me questions and I ask.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, we are happy to stay connected.
Oh, yeah.
Some great
Absolutely.
questions tonight.
And thank you guys all for taking the time to come on here on an evening after you worked hard all day. We appreciate seeing you, and we enjoy being in community with you. So
agreed.
Yeah.
And for Wendy, we're gonna do the 9:30. We're gonna rejigger the 9:30 call at night format, and probably do more guest speakers at night. So we'll stay tuned for January for that.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Happy holidays,
Good
everybody.
night.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
See ya.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays.
Team
Bye.
Excel.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.